Since I had a few people asking, and because I know the notation I used was a little confusing, I wanted to make a quick, very slapdash, low production video showing how to do the caribou stitch. I'll do a better one later on, but I figured for this group you guys wouldn't mind if it was kind of just thrown together. It's a pretty simple stitch. It's just a variation on finish 2 plus 2. So let me, I guess, walk you through it. The first thing is the connection stitch. I know a lot of people were thrown off because I wrote down HXL. I guess just ignore that for right now. It's an F1B1. When I was going through and looking at connection stitches, and I did the big post I have, there's a bunch of pictures and there's a lot of different ways to connect stitches. I really didn't think that F1B1 is a great way to write down what's going on, because most connection stitches start, the next loop over. So like here, this is the next loop you'd be working with, and then however they're written indicates what's going on forward. Well, F1B1 goes backwards, and if you were to write F1B1 and interpret like going in this and then out the second one, that seems like the literal translation of that, but anyhow, I digress. An F1B1, of course, is going, so this is the old stitch that or the old connection loop off of the last stitch. So you go into the next one, you're going forward to back, and then you swing back and come back in. This is why I was writing it as HXL, which is horizontal X left, because if you do it right, there's a nice little X that shows up because of the two different loops and how they're overlaid. So that's your connection stitch. HXL F1B1. The next part, oh, and I should know, I'm a picker, so I use my needle to take off the active loop, the one that's going into the stitch. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people just pull their thumb back and drop it. Also, there's people that work flat. I don't have the skill set to show how to do flat Nalbinding. I'm not great at it. If anybody else would like to translate this to that and show, like, by all means, you have my blessing. But I'm just working with off the thumb because that's what I do, and I'm a picker, so I take the active loop off with this. So as the notation says, there's going to be 2 loops on your thumb, so there's the 2 there. This is the active loop, so I pick it off with my needle, and then I pick up one more back here, so I've got 2 back loops. So there's F2 plus 2, right? And then this is pretty simple, not too dissimilar from the finish 2 plus 2. You come back around, but rather than going under both of these loops on your thumb, you're only going to go under this first one. When you're looking at it, it'll always kind of look like this because you're going to constantly be weaving. That last, this is the active strand that goes to your needle, is always going to go over that strand when you get to this point. It'll make sense at the end. I'll just kind of do it without talking. But when you come back around for the return pass, you're just going to pick up that first, just the one. You're not going to pick up the second one, just that first one. And then you want the thread that goes to your needle to go over it as well. This isn't a plated stitch, it's a normal-ish stitch as far as this last part is. So you pull that over, and then you pull your needle through. The motion of it is pretty simple, so we'll go over it again. This is going to be an F1B1 or an HXL. You take your next stitch, you're going front to back to front in the old one. There's my nice little X. Get your setup however you get there. Like I said, I'm a picker, but if you drop them, whatever. 2 on my thumb, 2 behind my thumb, come back around, pick up just the one. I do this little wrap like this. It's how I do plated stitches too. If you're really good with your hands, you won't have to do that. You could just stab where you need to, but I kind of like it because it reminds me as I'm doing stitches that this is not like a normal just all straight through the thumb loops. A muscle memory is kind of tricky like that, so for me, doing that kind of makes it deliberate enough where I'm not missing anything. But yeah, this is Caribou. It's not too difficult to do. I don't know if it's awkward for people that have other hand movements they use. But I don't know. I thought it was just about as simple as finish 2 plus 2. I'm going to do a few more stitches just so you can see. Again, this is all speaking from the perspective of somebody who works off of their thumb. Not everybody does this, but there's a lot of other extra hand movements that can go into working a stitch than just where your needle's at. For example, a thing I use a lot, and I'll show you when I get to it, is this backhand and these fingers. Like I stretch the fabric or pull it into place quite a bit with just a simple like this motion. And that helps like slide a lot of stitches into place and a lot of loops into place as you're working, particularly when you're working faster. So like in particular, I nib that right there and I push through, but then when you pull right here, it kind of sets everything into place where it needs to be. It also tensions all of your loops as you're making them, your stitches, to the size of your thumb, so they come out pretty uniform. But yeah, this is, I don't know, this is it. It makes for a really cool fabric. I like it quite a lot. There's a lot of kind of stretch horizontally because the F1 B1 pickup, which is the same as used in like cross knit looping, works quite a bit more like knitting than other Nalbinding is, which I know is like dirty words, but that adds some of the stretch I've found as I've experimented and tried different stitches. Some of the horizontal stretch comes out when you use that kind of a connection because it's structured differently than like an F1 or an F2. It does make the back look a little different, and I'll show you. I've got my hat over there. I'll show in just a second of what it acts like. But it makes for a fabric that kind of acts a little differently than a lot of other stitches, and it's just kind of nice looking in my opinion. Hopefully maybe that's given you an idea of how this works. Everybody works Nalbinding a little differently, so you'd have to maybe translate it to your style, but this is the gist of it. And you know, there's the fabric. If you turn it sideways, right there you can see the little caribou tracks that I was referring to. When it's stretched out, they show off a little more. This lighting's not super, well, there you go. But that's why I was calling it caribou, because it looks like little caribou tracks. That's, you know, that's that. This is the hat that I finished. It's huge, but you can kind of see the stretch on it, especially over like a head compared to a lot of other stitches. And then I'll show you the inside real quick, because this is what I mean about it. Almost looks like some kinds of knitting. These look almost like purl bumps. Not that, you know, you have to strive for things that look like knitting, but it was kind of funny to me to see a thing that looked very familiar. That's the inside. There's my sloppy joins because this is some cheap acrylic yarn. But yeah, that's the caribou stitch. I hope maybe this is helpful for people that wanted to give it a try. I would love to see more people work with it. If you work with it in thinner weight yarns, it gets even more elastic, but that's the gist of it.